Once again, Nigeria's Electoral Act is to be amended. This is the season. This is the routine. Every 4 years, the Electoral Act as well as the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria are routinely amended to improve the electoral process. So far, this have not happened. The electoral process seems to be going from bad to worse. And again, the National Assembly, the House of Reps in particular, has before it a bill that seeks to make elections compulsory for all Nigerians. That is to say, all Nigerians must vote and those who do not vote will be queried. Is this the solution to Nigeria's electoral problem? Can the law make the electoral system to improve or make people decide to come out to vote in mass? This is the other side. My name is Rimamnde Shawulu. The bill to amend the Electoral Act was sponsored by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Dr. Abbas Tajudeen, and a member representing Labour's party from Plateau State, that is Honorable Ago. The bill seeks to penalize with 6 months imprisonment or 100,000 naira fine those who do not go out to vote when they are supposed to go out to vote. As it was argued on the floor of the House, several other countries, as a matter of fact, there are 22 countries in the world who practice that system, who have laws that make it compulsory for all people who are voting age to go out to vote. These countries include the following. As you can see on the screen, these countries include Argentina, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Bolivia, Brazil, Bulgaria, Chile, Congo Democratic Republic, Costa Rica, Cyprus, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Egypt, Fiji, and Gabon, and Greece. Argentina, one of the countries that has compulsory voting law, in the last 5 election seasons, has had quite an impressive number of people going out to vote. In the last elections, out of the 35,400,000 people who are registered to vote, a whopping 26 million people went out to vote. This represents about 74%. Only 26% of the people who were supposed to vote did not go to vote. And that is low compared to Australia, which has a voting population of 17,228,000 people, out of which in the last election, 2022, we had 15 million people go out to vote, representing 89.8% of the voters went out to vote. Only about 10.2% did not go to vote. Belgium, which also has that law, had also an impressive turnout in the elections that took place in 2019. That was the last time it had a round of election, this election cycle. Out of the 8 million eligible voters, 7.2 million people, representing 90%, went out to vote. The same way with Brazil. In Brazil, in 2022, out of the 156 million people on the voters register, about 124 million people, representing 79% of the people, went out to vote. Thailand too, in Asia, also had very good turnout. In the 2023 elections, out of the 52 million people, 39 million, representing 75% of the voting population, went out to vote. The same thing in Mexico. In Mexico, in last year's election, out of the 98 million people on the voters register, 59,800,000 people, representing 61% of the voters went out to vote, and only 39% did not go out to vote. Contrast that with the case of the United States. As you can see on the screen also, in the United States, in last year's election, out of the 244 million people who were qualified to vote in the United States, you had only 156 million people go out to vote, representing representing 63.9%. That is 36.1% of the people who were qualified to vote in the election that produced President Donald J. Trump did not go out to vote. In the United Kingdom, in last year's election, out of the 48 million people that were qualified to vote, only 28 million people, representing 59.8%, went out to vote. That was an improvement because in the election before that, that is in 2019, out of the 47 million people that were qualified to vote, 32 million people, representing 67%, went out to vote. Of course, that means that last year's election in the United Kingdom was one election that received one of the lowest voters' turnout. If you go to India, a country that compares the biggest democracy, we're told, in the world, in last year's election, out of the 968 million people that were qualified to vote, only 642 million people, representing 66%, went out to vote. A whopping 33% did not go out to vote. In the same way, in Germany, in the elections that took place in 2021, I don't have the statistics for the last election, out of the 61 million people that were qualified to vote, only 46 million people went out to vote, representing 76% turnout. Quite an impressive turnout, you may say. And in Canada, in the election that took place in 2021 as well, I don't have the statistics for this year's election that just took place some weeks ago. Out of the 27 million people that were qualified to vote, only 17 million people went out to vote, representing 62%. 37% of the people did not go out to vote. How about this? How about the situation in Nigeria? How about the situation in Nigeria? The situation in Nigeria as well is not as good as you say. The statistics are actually scandalously low in Nigeria. If we take a look at the statistics of Nigeria, we will see the following. If we look at the statistics for Nigeria that is on the screen now, in the year 1999, when Nigeria decided to, in 1999, when this democratic experiment or process started, we had 57 million people who were qualified to vote, and of that, only 30 million people went out to vote, representing 52.3%. 47% of the people who were qualified to vote, that is 27 million people, refused to go out to vote. In 2003, the voters register grew up to 60 million people. And in that election, one of the highest in terms of turnout, 42 million people, representing 69%, went out to vote. 18 million people whose names were on the voters register that is 30% of the voting population, did not go out to vote. In 2007, the voters list increased to 61 million, and out of that, only 36,800,000, representing 59%, went out to vote. 24.7 million people, representing 40%, did not go out to vote. In 2011, the voters register grew up to 73 million, and in that election, only 39 million people voted, representing 54%. 33 million people, that is 46% of the people whose names were on the voters register, did not go out to vote. In 2015, the elections that saw the APC come to power, the number of persons on the voters register dropped down to 67 million. And in that election, only 29 million, representing 43% of the voters, came out to vote. About 37 million, representing 56.3%, did not vote. Some people say this could be accounted for by the introduction of the card reader, which made it impossible for people, so it was claimed, to blot up the number of persons present and voting in any election. In 2019, the voters register grew up to 82 million. And in the elections that took place, only 28 million people, representing 34%, went out to vote. 65%, that is 53 million people whose names were on the voters register, did not go out to vote. Last year's election, the number of voters on the voters register grew up to 93 million. And only 26 million people, representing 27.8%, went out to vote. 67 million people, that is 72% of people whose names are on the voters register, did not go out to vote. It is obvious from the records that there is a problem. Increasingly, fewer Nigerians are beginning to go out to vote. And can this be rectified by a law that criminalizes not going out to vote? Let us look at the issues. Voters' apathy in Nigeria is very obvious. And if you have been involved in the political process, it is so difficult getting voters to go out to vote on election days. So difficult that in some cases, you have to, or candidates or political parties will have to hire or charter vehicles and motorbikes to get people to go and vote where they need to vote. Of course, the National Electoral Commission has made efforts to increase the proximity of the ballot boxes or the polling stations to where people live. And again, efforts have been made to ensure that these polling units are not in areas that will generate tension. So most polling units have been moved to public places, and in some cases, even the names of the polling units have been depersonalized to ensure that people can go out to vote when they need to go out and vote. And so why is it that increasingly the number of people who are willing to vote is decreasing by the day? Shouldn't we query the number that we have on the ballot, on the register, on the voters register? Are they genuine names? Are they fake names? One question that is very obvious that we need to answer is that this, if you look at every elections or most elections that have come out, you hear people who go to monitor the elections, including international observers, INEC officials, even politicians who contest elections, will tell you that the voter turnout is very high. And that happened in the last election. It is only the off-season elections that usually draw very low turnout. This raises a very serious question. Do we really have the number of people that we say we have on the voters register? Are they genuine names, or politicians and electoral officials, INEC officials, have blotted the names, have allowed double registrations to take place, and have blotted the names with fake names, so that we have a very large number of people on the voters register? We claim at every election season, if you just take a record at what people will tell, people say, especially people who go to observe election, they will tell you that the turnout is very high. In the few places, of course, the turnout may not be very high. And then the results comes out, we don't have even up to half of the number of people on the voters register registering. Does it mean that we do not have those people on the voters register? That is a question that we need to answer. And that question will also lead to the second question. We claim that Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, and that our population is well over 200 million people. Do we really have that population? Or the elites in Nigeria have all connived to tell lies about the population of their various communities, and that we may not actually have the number of people that we claim that we have? Because, come to think of it, we have not had any proper census that has been generally accepted. All the census that have taken place have been controversial, some of them even cancelled. Yet, we are depending on census that we have claimed are not correct to do projections about our population. Do we really have the number of persons that we say Nigeria has? And come to think of it, we also have areas that have been devastated by terrorism, by all kinds of disasters. Yet at every election, you will see that the number of persons registered and qualified to vote in those areas does not reduce. They are still the same. What is actually happening? Are we telling ourselves lies? Or we're bent on, we love deceiving ourselves. And anyone that deceives himself has himself to blame if he doesn't have the statistics to plan and take proper decisions. Another question too that we need to ask is, do we think that do we really think that if a law is made, this law is passed, this bill is passed, assented to by Mr. President, and becomes a law, how will it be implemented? What kind of penalty are you going to give? Just take a look at the statistics. Assuming that you are going to penalize the over 70% of people on the voters register that did not vote in the last election, how are you going to try them? Which courts do you have? You are going to inundate our law courts with cases that will not end. How are you going to take over 30 million people to court because they did not go out to vote? And then, where will you even take them to court for not voting when it is obvious from what we have seen, from what we have heard, that votes actually do not count in this country? We have super voters who sit down after elections to rewrite results. We have super voters at the that decide who can win primary elections, who can get elected, and the votes of people, the rights of people, increasingly when it comes to elections, are ignored, generally ignored. So what guarantee do you have that if you make this law, it is actually going to be implemented? Or will it not be used to victimize people who have given up on voting because votes do not count? Well, another question that comes to mind which we need to query is the issue of our Electoral Act. Increasingly, we are trying to make laws to make up for our bankruptcy, our immoralism, our inability to do what is right. And of course, like I said in a previous discussion, the law derives directly from generally accepted moral rules that govern any society. And so, how do you say you are going to penalize people who do not vote, when so far people have violated the electoral law, have violated election process, and since 1999, very, very few people have been brought to book, taken to court, and even tried. And last week, a story came out that the professor who was convicted for rigging elections in Akwa Ibom is not in prison. He's walking free, according to news reports. So how do you now want to do a law that will penalize people who may have grown tired of going out to vote because their votes don't matter, when the people who make sure that votes don't matter go scot-free are not brought to question? And so the question that we need to ask ourselves now is, do we really need this law? Will this law change anything at all about the Nigerian electoral process? I want us to engage, to ask ourselves these questions. Is this the way to go? Can this improve the electoral system? Or we're just on another time-wasting venture? This is The Other Side. My name is Rimamnde Shawulu. Please subscribe, like, and share our video. We'd like to have your comments. What do you think about these laws, about this constant amendment to the electoral law? Can we really improve the electoral system if the laws that are made are not implemented, if the people who violate the laws are going about scot-free and not being questioned? Should we penalize people who are reacting to the fact that the electoral law is not being implemented? I'd like to have your comments. Let us have a discussion. What do we need to improve this electoral system that we have? You can listen to us also on Rock FM if you are in Jalingo, or anywhere you are in the globe. Just go to india.live. You will listen to us and other commentaries.